In the late 1980s, American television was a comfortable, predictable place. Shows like Full House, The Cosby Show, and Family Ties dominated prime time, delivering wholesome portrayals of loving families who resolved their problems in 22 neat minutes. Audiences were used to it, but many were quietly growing tired of it. Then came Married with Children and everything changed. Premiering in 1987 on the then-fledgling Fox network, Married with Children didn't just break the mold of the American sitcom, it burned it down. Al Bundy wasn't a warm, patient father figure. He was a bitter shoe salesman who despised his job, resented his marriage, and spent most of his days mourning the life he never got to live. His wife Peg wasn't a devoted housewife, she was a television-addicted, shopping-obsessed woman who rarely cooked and almost never cleaned. Their children, Kelly and Bud, weren't endearing troublemakers. They were selfish, lazy, and proud of it. That was entirely the point. From the very first episode, the show broadcast a clear message. This is not a story about idealized families. This is about dysfunction, disappointment, and the kind of brutal honesty that primetime comedy had never dared to explore before. There were no soft piano moments at the end of each episode, no moral lessons neatly packaged for the audience. Just fat jokes, dirty jokes, poverty jokes, and an unapologetic tone that dared viewers to laugh at the things polite society pretended not to see. The response was electric. The show became a cultural phenomenon almost overnight, the voice of a cynical, working-class America that had never seen itself reflected on television quite like this. Al Bundy's tirades against miserable customers, his one-minute glory as a high school football hero, Peg's open defiance of the obedient housewife role, all of it felt like rebellion dressed up as comedy. But the same sharp edge that made Married with Children beloved also made it one of the most controversial shows on American television. Critics called it crude and irresponsible. Religious groups protested its content. Politicians cited it as evidence of cultural decay. Network censors were permanently on high alert. Scripts were flagged, jokes were rewritten, scenes were cut. Even so, every single week the show pushed harder. There was, however, a line. A line that even this show wasn't supposed to cross, and one episode crossed it completely. The episode was called, I'll See You in Court. It was fully produced during the show's third season and scheduled to air in 1989. The cast and crew had no reason to believe it was anything other than another outrageous entry in a long line of outrageous episodes. The plot followed the standard Bundy formula, on the surface at least. Al and Peg, desperate to add some spark to their famously loveless marriage, check into a seedy motel for a romantic getaway. What they don't know is that the motel secretly records its guests through hidden cameras. When they discover that the tape of their intimate night together has been viewed, and possibly distributed, without their consent, they decide to sue. But instead of finding justice, they find only more humiliation because their neighbors, the Rhodes, had stayed at the same motel and been recorded too. What follows is a courtroom sequence packed with testimony so graphic and jokes so deeply uncomfortable that even die-hard fans of the show reportedly winced. The episode tackled themes of privacy violation, voyeurism, and sexual exploitation, and it did so through slapstick comedy. On paper, it wasn't far removed from the show's usual chaos. But when the script reached Fox executives, alarm bells rang immediately. The subject matter hit differently in 1989. Before social media, before viral leaks, before the term revenge porn existed in public conversation, the idea of being secretly filmed in an intimate moment and having that footage distributed was not merely titillating, it was loaded with legal and moral weight. Consent, voyeurism, and public exposure were topics that sitcoms simply didn't touch. And yet here was Married with Children, making it the punchline of a half-hour comedy. Fox was still a young, fragile network, desperately trying to prove itself to advertisers while maintaining the edgy, countercultural image that set it apart from ABC, NBC, and CBS. Internal memos suggest that a number of advertising buyers were deeply uncomfortable with the episode's subject matter. Placing ads alongside jokes about illegal recordings of intimate acts felt, to them, like an enormous risk, and Fox at that stage couldn't afford to take it. So the episode was quietly buried. No announcement. No explanation. It simply vanished from the schedule, never aired in the United States, and was quietly excluded from every syndication package, home video release, and rerun compilation that followed. The timing could not have been worse. In 1989, Married with Children was already fighting a very public battle. A Michigan housewife named Terry Ricalta had stumbled upon an episode of the show while her children were watching television. What she saw, the sexual jokes, the innuendo, the unapologetic crudeness, horrified her. She didn't simply change the channel. She declared war. Recalta launched a grassroots boycott campaign, writing letters to Fox's major sponsors and urging them to pull their advertising. The campaign worked. Large corporations including Kellogg's and Coca-Cola withdrew their advertising from the show. National news coverage followed. Conservative commentators praised her effort. What had started as one woman's outrage became a full-scale cultural movement, a battle over what television was allowed to be. Fox suddenly found itself on the defensive. The network that had built its identity on being bold and rebellious now had to prove to advertisers that it was also responsible. Into this climate walked I'll See You in Court, an episode centered on secret intimate recordings, courtroom testimony about private acts, and jokes about exploitation. It was, for executives already in panic mode, exactly the kind of grenade they could not afford to handle. The irony, as many inside the production noted, was striking. The show had already aired episodes featuring jokes about necrophilia, openly discussed sexual fantasies, and built entire storylines around the objectification of Kelly. None of those moments had caused the network to flinch. But in the specific climate of 1989, in the aftermath of Recalta's boycott, with advertisers skittish and the network under intense public scrutiny, this particular episode, with its particularly sensitive legal implications, was too much. Fox pulled it without a word and it stayed pulled. Inside the studio, I'll See You in Court had been just another episode. The cast rehearsed it. The director blocked it. The crew lit the motel scenes, shot the courtroom sequences, and wrapped filming as usual. Nobody realized they had just produced the most controversial, and soon to be completely buried, episode in the show's history. When the news came that it wouldn't air, the reaction was a mix of confusion and disbelief. Ed O'Neill, who played Al Bundy, reportedly couldn't understand why this was the episode that got pulled. He had delivered monologues about women's hygiene, insulted customers to their faces, and made his intimate life the subject of countless degrading jokes, and none of that had caused the network to blink. Why this one? Katie Segal, who played Peg, found the script funny and sharp. To her, the motel story was entirely consistent with the show's awkward, over-the-top sensibility. The idea of Al and Peg accidentally becoming the unwilling stars of an unauthorized private video was, in her view, perfectly absurd, and perfectly Bundy. Nothing about it was glamorous or romantic. It was awkward, humiliating, and ridiculous, which was exactly what the show was always about. Co-creator Michael G. Moy later recalled, in DVD commentary, that the episode had passed through the normal pre-production approvals without a single red flag. It was only the pressure from the Recalta campaign and the growing anxiety among advertisers that caused executives to look at every script differently. I'll See You in Court didn't get pulled because it was bad, it got pulled because it was a legal liability wrapped inside a set of dirty jokes, and the timing was catastrophically wrong. Among the crew, the episode quietly became something of a legend. Some joked that it had fallen into a Bundy-Bermuda triangle, filmed, finished, and gone without explanation. Years passed and rumors circulated. Fans on message boards claimed to have seen a bootleg copy air late at night. Others insisted it had played somewhere in Canada. None of it was confirmed. But among those who worked on the episode, there was always a quiet belief that it would surface eventually. As one anonymous production assistant later told a television retrospective, "We knew it would come back. It was too good not to. Too bold." They were right. For over a decade, the episode existed only as sitcom folklore. It wasn't in any DVD box sets. It wasn't in rerun packages. It wasn't listed in episode guides. To newer fans, it was a ghost. Then, in 2002, FX, which had acquired the full Married with Children syndication catalog, quietly included the episode in a weekday afternoon airing. No announcement. No promotion. It simply appeared. Longtime fans who had grown up hearing whispers about the missing episode suddenly watched it materialize on screen, and the reaction, even in the early days of internet forums, was immediate and electric. Threads exploded. People quoted lines and shared reactions and asked, "Did anyone else just see that? Was that the real thing?" It was. FX aired the original, unedited episode. Nothing censored, nothing cut, and while it aired only a handful of times before disappearing again due to programming changes, it was enough to reignite the conversation permanently. Fans petitioned for its inclusion in official releases. Entertainment writers covered it in retrospectives. Cast members were asked about it at every reunion. The episode had stopped being a curiosity and had become a symbol. Now, decades later, it's finally getting its proper moment. The upcoming digital release will feature the episode as the centerpiece of a collection titled, Too Hot for Prime Time. a compilation of banned, deleted, and long-buried episodes from legendary television shows. The episode has been remastered and upscaled to HD, accompanied by new commentary from surviving cast members and producers, as well as a short documentary examining the full story of its suppression. The timing is no accident. We now live in a world defined by surveillance capitalism, leaked private content, revenge porn legislation, and an ongoing cultural reckoning with consent and digital privacy. The themes that made "I'll See You in Court" feel untouchable in 1989 are the exact themes that dominate headlines today. What once seemed like a reckless, disposable gag has aged into something that feels, in many ways, prophetic. The Bundys were filmed without their knowledge. Their footage was stored, potentially copied, potentially shared. When they tried to seek justice, they found only mockery and a legal system more interested in absurdity than accountability. It sounds like a comedy setup, but it also sounds remarkably like real life in 2025. The laughter never erased the violation. It exposed it. And perhaps that's exactly why the episode was buried and exactly why it still matters now. This is the lost episode they tried to erase. One that tested the limits of television then and still raises eyebrows today.